Good morning. Thanks for joining us for the weekly webinars. Today we have Calvin Rands with us, and he'll be talking about remote teaching versus on-campus teaching. Thanks for being with us here today, Calvin. Take it away.
Okay, so I'm just going to spotlight myself. So I should become full screen for everyone. See a couple of nods, so that's good just because of the technological setup I use. So today, what I'm going to be talking about is a little bit on my experiences of online teaching during COVID and my reflections on what is required of an online teacher versus an on-campus teacher. And there'll be some discussion around it. The main presentation, I'm actually using what I presented at the Education Day. So if any of you were there, the slides might be familiar. But before we jump into that, I really realize it's early in the morning. So I always like to start with a bit of a check-in. Actually, Naomi normally does something similar, so she hasn't yet. So I'm going to jump to. So if you have a secondary device or can open up a browser on your computer, if you go to menti.com, the address is at the top of the page. You should be able to access some of these questions. So the first one is just a quick 3-question check-in. How is your day thus far? How was your time? You know, was it easy to afford the time to come to today's event? Yeah, my little sort of experimental view on COVID. It's a big control experiment on the influence of human interaction on work life. So very good. See a lot of people having a good day. Oh, now, of course, as I say that, it comes down a bit. Yeah, good to see that people are, I think the timing, now that we're in the second half and we've gotten used to the situation a little bit, our time management is a little bit easier. Okay, so that's good. I'm glad a lot of people are having a good day. I hope I can make it a little bit better. If not, at least give you something to laugh at. The next one is, you know, of these scientists, they're all physicists. Well, one engineer. I couldn't find too many female physicists. Which one of them best captures how you're feeling today? See how this kind of comes in. Oh, it's kind of evening out. I must kind of tell a bit of a joke on this slide. I actually gave a talk at Applied Sciences. That's why it's all physicists, and I used this slide. And lo and behold, the response gave me a perfect normal distribution, just by chance. I thought that was just perfect, how much they use a normal distribution. So a lot of Hedy Lamarrs, people who feel that they can juggle a successful Hollywood career as well as be an amazing engineer that develops outstanding technology. So that's really good. The other one is we're all in different places at the moment. So what's something around you that you see that makes you smile? Other than me, you know, I don't need to be flattered and stuff at the moment, and maybe I don't make you smile, but someone has a banana peel, coffee machine. Coffee machines make me smile. Actually, the smell of coffee makes me smile. And some pets, some art, new monitor setup. Yeah, that's like in these days, it's like getting a brand new office. Instead of, you know, being happy that you've got now the corner office, it's kind of like I have a dual monitor setup. I think that's the equivalent today of getting that new corner office with all the windows. So, okay. Travel photos. That makes me smile, but also makes me a little bit sad. I miss traveling a little bit, I must say, but it's good to reminisce on the photos and that. Okay, very good. Then I have only one more question before we jump into things. And that's really sort of topical, and that's, what do you feel is the biggest difference in your role as an online teacher versus an on-campus teacher? You know, if you could boil it down to the biggest extreme difference, what would you feel that is? And that one might take a little bit more time. So we got connection with students, lack of real contact, interaction with students, encouraging student interactions. Yeah, the more a mental coach one. So a lot of these topics I'm going to touch upon today. Creating personal relations with students, or helping them, I mean, create personal relationships with each other. You know, providing motivation, make them the full ownership of their own process. My laptop being my life partner. I like that one. I need to put that on a t-shirt. I can get that. I divorced my wife for a laptop or something. I don't think my wife would appreciate that one, but okay. But this touches upon a number of topics, and I'll turn my face back on so you can see. Oh, and I didn't even start the clock, but I wanted to talk a little bit about what I learned about the differences between an online and on-campus teacher. And it's kind of interesting because I've been doing stuff online with blended learning for the past 5 years, but being thrown completely into online really took me for a bit of a loop. And so I've thought about this, if I put this slide up here and to show you the two different classrooms, like last year versus this year. So before we had, you know, a classroom, you could stand up there with your slides and you have all the students. And what is characteristic of this environment? Well, I'm going to put it a little bit negative, but students are trapped in a lecture, right? They can't go anywhere. So you have their attention because they're trapped. I guess they could get up and leave, but there's nothing else really to focus on there, except for maybe a laptop. And actually some professors have a no laptop policy in their lecture room for that reason. They are also able to, the only distraction, which is potentially constructive, is interaction with the immediate peers around them. Okay, and if you contrast that to the modern day sort of classroom, well, it's opposite. It's completely easy to escape. There's no consequence of getting up at any point. It doesn't disrupt anybody else. You're completely isolated. You cannot see how other people are doing. You cannot compare yourself to other people very easily. And there's far too many distractions because this environment is ideally an environment full of fun things to do that aren't work, because it's your home. And so we're really struggling with these sort of two environments. And I sort of feel that I've improved in my teaching having to deal with this new environment, because here I could be lazy with some of those things because of the sort of prison-like environment of a classroom, if I put it in a bit of a negative way. So one of the things I've learned is it's really that effective engagement. And I think the things that I've learned from being an online teacher are going to make my classroom experience much better, because I think it's still important in the classroom environment. But it's much more necessary when they're out of the classroom and you really have to focus on effective engagement. And this has made me think about what things do we find in life that are engaging? And actually, one thing that really spoke to me is political cartoons. So if I show this political cartoon, it's a very simple cartoon talking that came out when airlines were complaining about, you know, potential carbon limits and CO2 taxes and all these sorts of things. And, this cartoon gets at it really in a nice way of making it relate to the passengers, to individuals. What they're complaining about is sort of like us complaining about, trying to get our suitcase into that small little bin restriction. And it really made me think that it's not just the content, it's not just the message, it's making it relatable, it's making it connect with specific people so that they're engaged in the topic and can think about it a little bit more. Because learning is not just seeing the content, it's the reflective aspect. And in order to do that, it really needs to be engaging. I also started thinking a lot about humor and jokes. And this is actually one joke that I utilize in my class. It's a classic joke that many people may have heard. And that classic joke is about a farmer asking a team of academics to solve a problem of low milk production on the farm. So this farmer went and talked to several academics. The first academic he talked to was an engineer, and the engineer suggested that building a better vacuum pump to suck the milk out of the cow will increase milk production. And that was their solution. Not completely satisfied, the academic decided to go talk to a social scientist. And the social scientist suggested playing classical music to create a nice environment that will stimulate the cow and increase milk production. And then the farmer decided to talk to one more academic and decided to talk to a physicist. And the physicist said, I have a solution, but it only works for a spherical cow in a vacuum. Okay? So this is a classical joke. Many of you have sort of heard it. And I actually tell this in class, because most students don't actually understand it at first. That's the fun bit. So then you try and deconstruct that joke. But then I tell them, the reason why this is so funny to physicists and engineers and scientists is we do this all the time. We essentially come up with things that are fake. Frictionless ramps, point masses, cantilever beams, point forces, rigid bodies. All of these things are not real, but they're useful to some degree. And that's why the joke is funny to physicists and engineers. Is a spherical cow in a vacuum is one of those sorts of things, of a super idealized case that gives us some information, but not everything. So this made me think, actually having done that joke in class before, it made me reflect a little bit about how we're approaching the lack of reality in the current education mode. And it made me think about, well, it's not a farmer asking about milk production. It's about, academia asking us, a bunch of academics, to completely transform on-campus education to remote learning in a response to a global pandemic. And in a way, our solution has been that we've come up with a solution, but it only works if the students are robots and can spend 16 hours a day in front of a screen and never lose focus, right? Because we're just tossing content at them. As a generalization, there's a lot of amazing teachers that are doing lots of amazing things, but that has been one of the things, is just to transform the content from on campus to that isolated room, but without the help of the prison-like environment of the lecture room to keep them focused on that. So I realized this early on with a co-lecturer for one of my first year courses. And we really tried to think about, well, how can we deal with that? How can we deal with that environment and make it as engaging as possible? And so I'm going to reflect a little bit on that, and I am going to see, hopefully the audio on this will work. It's always a problem with technology. So I see John Allen's camera. So John Allen, when I flip the slide, can you just give me a thumbs up if you hear the audio, because I won't hear it from my side.
Okay, so we only have a couple of months to plan and implement how to put our studies course in the first year bachelor program online.
Indeed, it's going to be quite a challenge, especially considering that these will be new students unfamiliar with TU Delft. There is a huge risk of them feeling disconnected and isolated without access to direct in-person help. I wonder what we can do to help them navigate this new situation.
Kelvin, I know that look on your face. You're scheming up some new idea that is wonderful, but is going to take up far too much time and effort. Remember, we only have 2 months to prepare for Kelvin. Why am I suddenly a cartoon?
Shh. We are in a world of creativity and possibility now, and I have a brilliant idea. We always talk about education being a journey, but now it's a long and unfamiliar journey, completed in relative isolation, with its fair share of technical difficulties, and with a destination that in many ways will be a first for students.
Yes, I agree. You just highlighted all of the challenges we are faced with, but I don't see the brilliant idea yet.
Why don't we turn that negative perspective into one of possibility? Why don't we name that destination? Our students are on a journey to Mars, and as elite astronauts, they are ready for the challenges of isolation, prepared to troubleshoot and fix problems along the way, and willing to do what it takes to make it to their final destination. Remote learning is not an obstacle for them, it is in their blood. Okay, so that was just sort of a little introduction to our sort of concept. We really kind of jumped on this theme of, you know, I'm lucky teaching in an aerospace faculty because all the students in that faculty have such a narrow focus of interest on aircraft and spacecraft. And so we really thought, you know, why not leverage that? Why not utilize the fact that some of the things that they will be experiencing, the need to focus, the distractions, the isolation, can actually relate to things that are of interest to them. So we took this sort of journey to Mars. I must point out that I'm very lucky that I got to co-teach. I'm not even the responsible instructor. I like to call myself the irresponsible instructor because I'm always disrupting things. But I was very lucky to be paired up with Julie too, and she was very understanding and willing to give time to transforming how we taught this course. Just to give a bit of a context, this course has about 480 students, and it's a first-year course in our bachelor. So we took this metaphor of a journey to Mars and a space mission and utilized aspects of it to connect with what the students should be doing within the course, but also for dealing with challenges. And I'll come back to that challenge one in a moment. So the first thing that we really kind of came up with was the idea of keeping in mental shape. So just like an astronaut in space has to regularly keep up with exercise or their muscles will deteriorate, it's the same in a mental way, that you have to kind of keep up with regular studying. This whole idea of cramming just before an exam is going to be quite problematic. And we actually even talked about it that way. You know, you let your muscles deteriorate. If you just work out 3 days before, you're not going to develop the strength, the muscular strength you need in order to be able to perform. Now, this is the one thing that I really learned in terms of online is in a lecture, we schedule the lectures and we sort of say, yeah, there's a bunch of other stuff you should do. In terms of them being in their own room and isolated, we really took more time to break down the different types of activities that we wanted them to do, whether it was lecture prep, whether it was, so we did a blended learning lecture prep with videos. We had shorter online lectures that were a bit more engaging and interactive, homework sessions, which we even had scheduled homework sessions to try and facilitate interaction. The StudiCollage or the online instructions and weekly quizzes. And we actually spent time describing the purpose of all these activities, just like on a space mission, and even coming up with a schedule. And not everything can be scheduled because everyone had slightly different schedules. But as I said, we shortened the normal lectures and created scheduled homework sessions where they could do breakout rooms and interact and discuss with each other. Because that would sort of naturally happen in the classroom where they can talk with each other, but in isolation, they don't necessarily organize themselves well. So really sort of addressing that and breaking up, this is what I recommend as a schedule. This is what I recommend as study habits. And we even broke down the unscheduled activities and gave a few examples of, if you're a morning person, wake up early and do studying in the morning at these sorts of blocks, and you should have X% of a homework assignment done at this point, just to give them some of those measures and markers that we kind of take for granted on campus because the students are all pushing each other. The other thing that we really sort of identified was being able to track their progress. So in the space, same in aircraft as well, they have procedures and checklists. If something happens, I need to check these things off to make sure I'm doing these sorts of things, to monitor, self-monitor what's going on. And that caused us to take a really serious look at our Brightspace page. I've been guilty in the past of using Brightspace as an environment for uploading PDFs of my slides, and that's it. And in this year, we really broke it down with, time estimates, activities between reading, watching, solving, thinking about, self-assessment polls. It was really sort of systematic in terms of different activities I wanted them to do rather than just, here's the slides. And sometimes it was even things like, we put in every once in a while something like, go out for a walk today, get out of the classroom and take a photo of a structure and think about it, because this whole course relates to structures. Just little things like that, because they weren't getting that sort of engagement with each other. So it really made you think more holistically about everything you would like them to do with the content rather than just delivering the content to them. The next thing that we encountered was, the loneliness, the sort of missing out on the student experience. And in this, we made the analogy with a long duration space mission. You're on the spacecraft and your only communication with home will be through video messages that you'll send. There'll be delays. It's not really live sort of interaction. And so we chose to mimic this, utilizing our TAs. We realized as well that the teacher cannot replace the peer-to-peer sort of interaction they were missing on campus, right? We have a different role. We're there to encourage and coach, but they will have a different connection with their peers. And so for this, we really relied on our teaching assistants. We were lucky to have the 10 teaching assistants act as sort of the family, adopted family for all of these students. And I must give credit to all 10 of these TAs. We really gave them a lot of freedom to do that. We basically had a meeting before the beginning of the quarter and sort of said, your role is to help students feel connected to the faculty and help them experience the things that you experienced in your first year through your sort of interactions. And that's the discussions, the interaction, what are you worried about? What are you thinking about? And gave them carte blanche to do that. What they came up with.
What was your big?
I'm going to show an example of it, but they came up with a weekly video newsletter. And I'll just show you a few excerpts of it just to give you an impression, and then I'll detail some more about it. So,
what was your biggest challenge with online exams?
My biggest challenge for doing an online exam is making it feel like it's a real exam. So usually what I do is make sure my room is completely clear without any distractions, and I like to always use a pair of earplugs to completely isolate myself from the rest of the world.
My biggest challenge on online exams was getting distracted with what was happening outside the window. So my solution was just to close the window.
In your opinion, what is the best tip for preparing yourself for exams?
An exam session is best done when you feel comfortable. This means having some nice snacks and some drinks, something to drink, and also make sure that your head is in an exam focus. So prepare well in front of the exam. Don't sleep until 10 minutes before.
So I always try to make sure I have enough sleep, especially the night before the exam. And cramming the night before the exam is never a good idea.
Finally, the TAs would like to share some encouragement messages with you.
When you feel stressed or down, remember that probably 400 more people are struggling with the same things as you are. So you are not alone and you are not stupid. Just keep on pushing.
So first of all, I'd like to wish you all very good luck on your exams. Do study hard to them, do not underestimate it. And when studying, always remember, you guys are the top students, the top engineers in Dutch society or even in the whole world. So always bear that in mind, and I hope you can pass your first few exams.
My biggest tip for the exams would be make sure that your study load and your relaxation is in equilibrium, and then I'm sure you will manage the exam.
I just want to say good luck to all of you guys. It's really exciting, first exam period. Don't be scared. It's okay. Everything will be fine. And remember that your grades don't define you as a person. So even if it doesn't go well, keep moving forward and you can do it.
If you fail an exam, there's always a reset. And if you fail the reset, there's always next year. And even if you don't make the BSA, there's always other bachelors, right? It feels a lot bigger right now than it is. Cut yourself some slack if things don't work out. There's always a different route to go.
You might think you're the only person struggling in your entire year, but you're not. 100%, like 40% of the entire year is just struggling as much as you are. And there's no point of comparing yourself in the way that you study, in the way that you learn. Just do things that work for you. Don't compare yourself, and it will all be okay at the end of it. Good luck.
So, yeah, that's a few excerpts from some of the later weekly newsletters, but they did these weekly video newsletters where they achieved a few things. One kind of connected with some of the topics of the week from a student's perspective. Are these the really difficult concepts? What did people struggle with? They try to connect with what the students, what life on campus is like, and how it was also from transferring from on campus to online, because all the TAs had experienced transferring to online in the previous academic year. And as you saw, a lot of tips on student life, study life, really also showing that there's multiple perspectives. So you saw even in that excerpt that some of the TAs had completely different points of views on things. And of all the things that we did, I think this was probably the most successful thing, in the sense that the students really felt that they connected with the TAs. And then in the weekly instruction sessions with the TAs, they were much more engaged, much more willing to ask questions and put themselves out there, because the TAs were putting themselves out there. And I think this had such a positive effect on students' mental well-being, even that addressing aspects with difficulty of exam and failing and consequences of that, because these things weigh on students a lot. Now, encountering technical difficulties. So this course was run in Q1, so everything was just starting up, and the tools, I think Microsoft Teams was changing its features every week, and we were struggling with things changing all the time. And we knew that this was going to happen, and we I know from my teenage son's experience in high school that it's easy for people to fixate on a technical difficulty as being the sole reason why everything went wrong, and it's not fair. So I wanted to address this in a way that students wouldn't use any sort of technical difficulty as an excuse. And just to give you an idea of some of the technical difficulties we encountered, we used a digital exam system that crashed during the final exam. We had breakout room functionality not present in Microsoft Teams as planned, even though we had whole educational components planned around that. Image visibility problems in a lot of our polls because of weird bugs in the Microsoft Forms. Students having challenges in uploading files for homework solutions. It's flickering there. Programming errors in digital homework assignments, and many, many, many more. We had lots of these. And you could imagine students could take any of those and sort of really look at it as, you know, this disrupted my education. So we wanted to turn it around, and we did that by trying to be transparent about it. And I actually used this slide from the Apollo 13 movie about how they had to take a square filter and make it fit into the hole for a round filter using only the things on the table. And I said, that's really what our education is like this year. You know, we're still trying to take our curriculum, our education program, and deliver it in this way that it wasn't planned for, using only the stuff that we have available to us. And I basically opened it up and said, we need your help in doing this, and got them on board in helping out. And the engagement we got on the discussion boards when you empower students like that was really amazing. Much more engagement than I've had compared to when we offered the course on campus. So be very transparent about the situation. And this also includes listening to students, because not only are the difficulties on your side, but they're on their side. And we did this by really trying to provide regular opportunities for students to communicate their difficulties, whether it was big obstacles they were encountering, you know, what are their tips for success. That's the polls on the left here. I also have my start, stop, go poll, as I call it. You know, what would you like me to start doing? What would you like me to stop doing? What would you like me to keep doing in terms of the course delivery, to give them that sort of input that they feel involved. And I can tell you, we got tons of engagement in the discussion forum about, you know, someone was encountering an obstacle and you would hear other students encouraging that person and getting them to help, which naturally happens on campus, but they're missing that in the online world unless you facilitate it. And the last thing was to try and have some fun. You know, we had this theme of this mission to Mars, and one day I think I was a little bit burnt out and you know, making video problems. And I thought back to when I was in university, and one of the things that I did when I was studying for my courses is I used to invent these outlandish backstories related to problems to provide a motivation. Like, you know, the world depends on me solving this problem because of some massive problem out there, and me calculating this is going to solve the whole thing. And it was an outlet for my creativity in university, but it also helped me motivate myself to do things. So we ended up doing this with a couple of problems, and I'm going to show you a video. And also sort of pay attention. There's lots of little themes embedded into it in terms of student attitudes and behaviors, and all kinds of Easter eggs in terms of referring to, actually there's a reference to the Aerospace Student Society in the video as well. But it's a 4-minute little animated backstory for why they need to solve a problem. It's another day on the moon, paving the way for humankind taking its first steps on Mars. The journey has not been without its hiccups. First, Mission Control made the blunder of designating a landing zone for your spacecraft on the opposite side of a canyon from the unmanned cargo vessels carrying the necessary supplies to establish a base on the moon. You solved that problem by constructing your own bridge design out of the materials that were available to you. The minds back at Mission Control were not too happy with you rejecting their design, which they felt was sufficient for the job. You remind yourself that those same minds also thought getting a 6 on their university exams was sufficient for the job, and as a result, they are back on Earth pushing paper while you are well on your way to walking on Mars. But with one problem solved, you are faced with fixing their mistakes again. A second crew of astronauts has arrived and is orbiting the moon. Before descending to the moon's surface, they are supposed to deploy a communication satellite, dubbed the Leonardo da Vinci, to remain in orbit around the moon. But there seems to be a delay. The communication satellite makes use of the Vectoring System Mark V, or VSV, in order to control the orientation of the satellite while in orbit. This control system requires an accurate calculation of the mass moments of inertia of the satellite. But one of the brilliant minds back on Earth that did this was sloppy in carrying units through all of their calculations, and now the mass moments of inertia are off by a factor that can only be described as being proportional to that engineer's IQ. You radio your colleagues in orbit to get a better sense of the problem. It seems that Mission Control has decided it was only fair to dish you out your own problem so that you wouldn't be jealous of all the fun we had designing and building our bridge down here.
You give them way too much credit in their ability to plan anything. They have a team of 12 men trying to come up with a solution now, but all they have figured out is that their billion-dollar communication satellite contains a control system that, ironically, cannot communicate with the outside world. So there is no means to solve this issue through a software update.
Well, if my university years taught me anything, it's never to underestimate the capabilities of an intelligent and determined woman. So my money is on you solving the problem before they do. But try not to take too long, eh? We're looking forward to that resupply of totally approved beverages that you didn't happen to sneak on board your craft before leaving Earth.
You think to yourself that if you can't update the software with real moments of inertia of the satellites, you might as well update the satellite with the moments of inertia that the software is expecting. By your calculations, you need to increase the moment of inertia of the satellite along its primary axis by 11.1 kilogram meters squared, and along its two transverse axes by 0.802 kilogram meters squared, all without changing the location of the center of mass of the satellite. You look around at what materials are available to you. There's a 3D printer on board that can fabricate just about any geometry you can think of out of titanium. To keep things simple, however, you opt for a simple design, comprised of slender 2 cm diameter rods, joined to form a T-shape that you can then join to the satellite to alter its mass distribution. You recognize that if you make the shape symmetrical, attach them to the satellite at its center of mass, and evenly distribute them angularly around the main axis of the satellite, you can alter the necessary moments of inertia without moving its center of mass. Mission Control reluctantly approves your plan, but is concerned that if you add too much mass to the satellite, it will adversely affect the lifetime of the satellite. You try not to roll your eyes as you explain to them that you understand that adding mass to the satellite won't mean it will burn through its thruster field faster than intended, and you intended to optimize the design concept for minimum mass. You switch off the radio just as one of the Mission Control scientists starts talking about constitutive equations and material deformation. You realize they are beginning to overanalyze the problem to try and save face, but you know this problem can adequately be analyzed by treating the satellite and the 3D printed structures as rigid bodies. Time to crunch some numbers.
Okay. So I can tell you, obviously that took a bunch of time. I'm not going to lie. But it was part of my own personal therapy in a burnout. But I can tell you, doing that resulted in students really diving so far deep into the problem, trying to build upon it, trying to think about new design scenarios, but also coming up with their own backstories to problems, and it really kind of rallied students together, kind of felt like they were doing something important rather than just doing an example problem. And the last theme I wanted to sort of mention on in terms of our mission to Mars is that we built upon is we understood that a lot of space missions end with inspiring words and with mission patches. So, you know, the Apollo 11, you know, the classic line, that's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind. And so what we ended up doing was making some little stickers that they could put on their computer, just with an astronaut standing on Mars with the words "remote work is in my blood," to sort of remind them that, you know, that could be a future that that remote working is actually an integral part of, and that, you know, in a way that they could see this year and the struggles as training for the isolation of space missions and that. And so we gave these, made these stickers, and we sent them out to all of the students. You can see my aviation themed top engineer play on the Top Gun logo is another one that we use, and we utilize that in class in previous years for in-class people responding to questions. You'd be surprised what students will do for a little sticker. You don't have to give little bonus grades and stuff. You just have like little things that they feel that they earned and can show as a badge of honor. And we still have students walking around with these stickers on their laptop. They're very happy that they earned the top engineer sticker or got one of these badges. And we also sent out some nice messages to the students to sort of encourage them to keep them going. So that kind of reflects on my experiences and what we did, and hopefully you can see in that what we were doing is I wasn't changing the content. The content is it's a statics course. It's been what it has always been. But our actions in the year were really focused on, you know, that connecting the students with each other, with the TAs, and making them feel a sense of responsibility through actually this sort of role play that they were an astronaut on this Mars mission, to get that engagement that we want. So that is what I have to say. I would like to hear if any of you have questions, comments, or things you want to discuss on in relation to that, since we have 15 minutes left to do so.
Well, Kelvin, first of all, congratulations. I mean, amazing. Now, my main question is, how did you create all these animations?
Yeah, so I always get that question. So the particular animations are made in a software called Vyond. It used to be called GoAnimate. Unfortunately, it's not a cheap software. I happen to have a license for it because we utilized it heavily in our aerospace structures and materials MOOC. So in that MOOC, we also created engaging storylines for experiments. We actually created a character called Hannah Hypothesis that teaches students about the scientific method. So it's quite a nice animation tool. You can actually do things relatively quickly. Like I would sort of say, once I had the script, doing the animation for that 4 or 5 minute video that I showed you was probably about 3 hours of work, which isn't actually that bad for a 5-minute animation, I must say.
Yeah. Great. Thanks.
Oh, great. Can I add to this as well? Yeah. So I'm having a webinar. I'm hosting one webinar next week at the same time, and I'm actually going to dive a bit into animations, not the one you made, Kelvin.
Yeah.
Amazing. But I do want to talk a bit about digital stories. So I'm using PowerPoint myself. So if you really want to get the first steps into this, how do you think about animation instead of visual? I think it's a nice addition to your story, Kelvin, on that specific aspect.
Yeah. No, and
thanks, Kelvin.
Yeah, and I use that tool because I had it available, but you don't need the fancy animation. Like I think, disrupt your view of PowerPoint of being slides with a bunch of bullet points, and more have images and, you know, even just transitions between images to make it a little bit more dynamic. What I learned is, as long as something is changing on the screen sort of every 30 seconds or something, just so that it's not static and disengaging, already has a huge benefit. So yeah, I've been experimenting with video making animation for a long time, so I probably go way beyond. I know I go way beyond what I would expect most people to do. But the having the storyline and that is 90% of the battle.
Yeah, indeed. Thanks.
Any other questions? Oh, there's some in the chat. Did you notice students who weren't engaged? If so, what did you do to engage them, and did you find out why they weren't engaged? I would sort of say it comes on multiple levels. So we would have the live lecture portion, and we would have about 60% of the students present. I don't think that doesn't necessarily mean they weren't engaged. I think a lot of them were managing their schedule and making use of recordings. So I judge the engagement on the participation with the TAs in the instructions in the smaller groups. And there we saw about a 90% attendance rate. And students were really looking forward to it, because we created space in that, in those instruction periods where a third of it was really just the TA asking students how they were doing. You know, almost like at the beginning of this webinar, we do a check-in and we're just, you know, just interacting a little bit. And, you know, they were sharing photos of pets. You know, just, you know, if someone had a really interesting experience, they got an opportunity to share it. Sort of the coffee or the water cooler talk, or coffee break talk type of thing. And that really helped. Where you saw disengagement, oftentimes, yeah, it was hard to track entirely, but students were getting fatigued about being behind a screen. So in our learning activities, I showed you the Brightspace page. We were conscious of that when we started making our blended learning videos. We recognize that we use, in engineering specifically, we tend to use the textbook as a resource for practice problems, and rarely do require a reading where you don't teach what they read anyways. So students aren't used to reading a textbook to just sort of actually learn it. So we consciously disrupted video time with, you know, open up a textbook to help with that. But still, we did encounter a lot of people just tired about being behind a computer. So I think that was probably the biggest thing behind disengagement. Is there any other? Oh, I see hands. Okay, sorry, I was in the chat and then I don't see the hands. Eddie, you have your hand up first.
So was the number of TAs raised relative to the non-digital version, so to speak?
Yeah, so in previous years we had 6 TAs, and we specifically asked to have more TAs. And why, actually, the reason why we asked it is, while on campus, it would be 1 TA in the instruction room instructing a group. And based upon my experience with online teaching and potentially the lack of engagement, I made the case to our educational support that I actually want 2 TAs present in every online session, so that 1 TA can be instructing and the other TA can act as a student, you know, ask questions and, you know, kind of break the barrier to engagement.
Also like monitoring the Q&A more or less, we did.
Yeah, so monitoring the Q&A and just, you know, being sort of the person focused on trying to spark engagement, because for a lot of them, the TAs, it's their first time in a sort of teaching role. So it's hard for them to manage everything. So we always had one person focused on try and spark engagement, ask questions, monitor chat, and the other teacher was leading the session.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay. Then I have Fabrizio.
Yes, hi, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Hi, thanks for the very inspiring ideas and talk. My question might be a little bit off topic, but what about the future? So what about if we go back hopefully on campus next year? How would you blend this new format to the regular on campus?
So actually, we discussed that, and we want to utilize it in the same way, except replacing the live stream aspect within a lecture room. So we've already talked about what actually was really nice is instead of taking that 2-hour lecture slot to give the students the responsibility to do lecture prep and then sort of say, well, I will do a 1-hour, you know, lecturing about examples, but then I'm going to give you time in class to work on homework. And we'll stick around and you can interact with students and facilitate that. So I've had a lot of experience doing sort of flipped classroom blended learning before. So we sort of set it up with that in mind. Of course, the analogy as a mission on Mars is not going to fully translate, but we can use aspects of it. We can reuse the animated videos, but really taking that concept that it's about engaging the student and making sure the content is there for them to dig into, rather than feeling that your role is to just throw content at them.
Yeah. So basically, you would like to maintain this, let's say, the same amount of classroom hours that you previously had, but actually flipping their classroom by doing those kind of activities that you had on remote, just in classroom.
I would like to have the, you know, absorbing content to be outside of the classroom and the working on the content to be in the classroom. Because normally what we do is we stand there and we teach them a content and then we tell them to go apply it. And the application of it is usually unsupervised or, you know, they're on their own. So changing that around, because it's the applying the content that is the thing that we really want them to be able to do.
Yeah. See. Thanks.
Yep. Santiago, you had your hand up next. And I don't hear you if you're talking.
Hi, Calvin. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you now.
I could hear. So I have. I think it's a fantastic way to implement education into online education. I really like what you showed. I have actually one question, because you know that this year we tried to have the course on online and somehow it worked. Some things really worked. Some other things didn't work, and one of them was actually the commitment of the first year students to follow the course weekly. And I was surprised actually with the commitment of the students. I was expecting students would really go and work weekly on the course, knowing that they had the lectures in advance, 1 week or more in advance, and they had 4 hours of Q&A sessions. And then I found that, yeah, less than 1/5 of the students was really committed. So we discussed this issue with the students. And what we found is that a lot of the students actually commented that other courses require so much extra effort weekly that they affected the courses that did not go into that much effort that was actually mandatory. For instance, these weekly exams, weekly assignments, weekly things. So then it turned out that actually it's extremely unbalanced. Courses that are maybe 3 ECTS, when they go into these weekly assignments that are mandatory, they become, or not mandatory, but they contribute to the grade. Then they take up many more hours from the students than those that meet the 3 ECTS.
Yeah.
And this actually came up when one of your slides where you showed actually 4 hours of commitment of the students per week. Sorry, 8 hours per week plus 8 hours of extra study leads to 16 hours for one course, 3 ECTS course. And
it's a 5 ECTS course.
It's a 5 ECTS. Well, that would help in the count. And that means anyway that one single course would be like 16 hours weekly work. And if I take per quarter, they have 4 or 5 courses. If I go into this commitment of the students, they get into 80 hours very quickly, which is or 60 hours weekly. It's unrealistic if it is also during the 5 days a week. Yeah. So is there any discussion on how all these strategies are affecting the quarter workload of the students?
Yeah, it's a good point. When we set up the course, we were very, very aware of this, and we broke down all the activities. So for instance, with the lecture preparation, that required a lot more preparation before coming to class. That's why we halved the duration of the live stream from a delivering content perspective. So we offset that. We ended up doing weekly quizzes to encourage pace, but then we halved the number of questions required for the weekly homework. So for everything that we added, we were very conscious to make sure to offset it. And when we presented that schedule to the students the year, it was based upon the credits. And we were very frank with them and said, well, this is the credits for the course. This is this sort of time commitment. This is how we've broken it up. We think you can afford to spend this much time on each of these activities. And I think a lot of lecturers in putting stuff online didn't necessarily have that sort of critical review on how much time does it take. Because, and I went through this mistake the first time I did the flipped classroom. I made all these lecture prep videos and had say, do that before you come to class. But then I had a 2-hour lecture that I still had something to do with. And then I ended up utilizing that. And I realized that it was unfair to do that because you're asking more of the student. So you do have to, if you're shifting things around, and that's our problem, is that we're used to our 2-hour bubble in the classroom, and then that's our space, and everything else is their responsibility outside. But with this preparation work, that is lecture room or lecture time. So you need to give them back some of the time or help them schedule that.
Yeah, I guess that is also what we tried to do and what I think we did. But what I found was this commitment. It seems to me that in online education, unless you put mandatory things per week, the commitment of the students will drop. Is it something that you also experienced?
Yeah, that's why we ended up switching some of the homework to quizzes where there was the carrot of a slight grade because of that motivation. But
yeah.
To be frank, it's hard to sort of say the commitment of the students, because when it comes right down to it, all of us are deadline driven as well, right? We all put off stuff. If you were doing a conference presentation, how many of us have gone to a conference and we're flying to the location, working on the conference presentation then? It becomes overwhelming in that. And a lot of these students, they haven't had the time to learn to pace themselves and set up good study skills because of how things are in high school. So we tried to, we didn't experience that issue with students because we were conscious of that and we're constantly hounding them. At the beginning, I would look at the engagement on lecture polls and I would see, 30% of the students did the lecture poll. And I'd be like, that's unacceptable. And I know that kind of seems like parenting and that kind of stuff, but the students need that structure. They need to be able to adapt. A lot of them went through high school, got good grades without having to do a lot of work. And they're encountering for the first time that it's not that easy in such a difficult program.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
So I want to jump in here and let you all know that we're at the end of time. I'll go ahead and end the recording. So thanks for those of you that are joining us in the recording.